Mike Tyson spent some time in his New York apartment between his conviction and his sentencing. One day, he was walking back from a girl's house and was about to enter his building when he saw a man standing outside. He walked right by him, but then he heard him speak. "Hey, how are you doing, son?" Mike looked at him and immediately recognized that it was his father. He hadn't seen him since his mother's funeral 10 years earlier. Mike said, "Hey, how are you doing?" Mike got scared at first, but he wasn't tripping. He had a pretty good life, so he wasn't bitter at him. But Mike's father looked pretty timid and a little intimidated. Mike was sure that he had heard some bad things about his street personality. But when Mike smiled and hugged him, it eased the tension. Mike said, "Come on upstairs," and led him into his lobby. "Wow, you're a big man, huh?" his father said. Mike told him, "No, I'm not big at all. It's just an illusion." His father had wanted to see him years earlier. In October of 1988, the New York Post sent a reporter to his father's housing project in Brooklyn and interviewed him. "I'm not going to Mike with my hands out," he told the reporter. "I don't want Mike's money. It's not that I wouldn't take it, that I couldn't use it, but I'd take it only if Mike wanted to give it out." At that time, Mike was just too focused on his fighting to reach out to him. But over the years, he had heard many stories about his father from people back in Brooklyn. He was a real shrewd street guy, a hustler, gambler, and a pimp deacon. His father was one of those Jesus freaks who would kill you for Jesus. He was from Charlotte, North Carolina, right smack in that Bible Belt. When he was younger, he sang in a gospel group. He always stayed with Jesus his whole life, but he was doing the dirt too. He was the real deal. He'd dress very well and get control over all the women in his church when they came to him for advice. When Tyson was growing up in Brooklyn, women would stop him on the street and tell him, "Your father and his brother were pimps, and we worked for them." He had a reputation as the baddest hustler and pimp in Brooklyn. Mike wrote in a book that it's going to sound funny, but the truth is, I was nowhere as tough as my father. I always wanted to imagine I was as tough as he was, but I just wasn't that guy. I had heard that my father had to leave North Carolina after getting into some dispute with a white guy. His uncle, who was an Uncle Tom type guy, mediated the dispute and saved his father's life by promising that he would leave town. So Tyson's father came to New York. When he got there, he went to some bar and started talking with a nice-looking woman. Then this guy with a nice big hat came in, one of those cool black guys, and smacked Mike father off the bar stool and started talking to the girl. He then abused Mike father. "Don't waste your time with him," the guy told the girl. Mike father got on a bus, went all the way back to Charlotte, got his rifle, came back to New York, and found the guy and shot him. If he had a beef with the police in Brooklyn, he and his brother would just shoot it out with cops. Tyson father had a lot of respect in the Brooklyn community. Tyson mother met his father back in Charlotte. She was in school in Winston-Salem, and she met his father's sister, who was basically a recruiter for my father. She would pick up drugs for him or find cute women. So she brought Mike mother to meet Mike father. When Mike was growing up, his father wasn't much of a presence, but he came around periodically. Mike didn't give him much credit because his mom was pretty bitter towards him, but Mike believed he did the best he could with the family skills he had. It wasn't easy being a black man with a family back then. So when Mike and his father went upstairs, he liked his place. They ordered some food up and just started talking. He seemed surprised that Mike had reacted so positively to him. Mike could see that he could use some money, so Mike gave him some. Mike really wanted to know more about him, so he invited him to come out to his Ohio house. Mike offered to buy him a car to drive out there, and he suggested to get him a Mercedes-Benz. "Oh God, no. Son, please don't," he protested. "The only thing I can do is drive a Cadillac. I don't know how to drive a Mercedes." He really had that pimp/preacher mentality about Cadillacs. He drove out to Ohio a few weeks later with Mike's sister's 2 kids. He was a very interesting man at that stage of his life. He'd stay in church all day. He'd be there from 9 in the morning until 5 at night, then come home and eat something and then go back to church until 11. He seemed to like Mike lifestyle. After a few days, he got comfy and invited one of his preacher friends over, another guy who dressed real sharp. They'd be sitting around talking shit. Mike would just watch him, study his characteristics. Mike saw that he loved candy. He was a 68-year-old man, and he was just loving eating his candy. Mike thought, wow, I'm a candy guy. That's where I'm getting it from. In a way, Mike envied the way he had all these relationships with women. Mike was just miserable with relationships, but he had to beat women away. And his father was a very successful pimp, but Mike couldn't get 2 dogs to fornicate. His father had 17 kids, and they all became awesome people. Later on, Mike met some of them, and none of them were crazy like him. At one point, Mike sat his father down and said, "Teach me something. What do you know about life? What can you pass down to me? Be my father." "I can't teach you anything, son," he said. "All I know is the Bible and pimping, and that's not for you. I know I saw you with your women." "You're a noob, son. It's nothing bad. Some people are just like that when it comes to women," he said. "Some men never reach that level in life where they can handle them. You're just one of those guys. You don't know how to talk to women. You're just not good." When Mike's father first came to visit, he had been very humble. But once he saw that he was open to him and giving him money, he started to get cocky. "I don't know if you are really my son, to be honest. You got one woman going out and one coming in, and they're almost meeting each other," he told Mike near the end of his stay. "You've got to tell them to come together. I had 5 or 6 girls in the house with your mama." Whoa. He was getting way too pimpish and giving Mike way too much information. Mike wasn't strong enough to handle it. Mike said, "Hey, chill, man. I love my mother. You're my father. I love you. Let's not talk about you and her. Let's just work on our relationship as father and son." And that was the end of their meeting. If you find this video informative, please subscribe.